Roeske-Zummer. Well, hello and welcome to In the Growth Space. This is the show for business owners and leaders who have a thirst for growth. Thanks so much for listening in today. On this show, I have conversations with leaders who have great growth stories so that we can all learn from them. Now, before we get started in today's episode, I want to let you know about the Inner Circle Summit. Now, if you're a leader, you're going to want to bring your team to this event here in the Pittsburgh region on Friday, December the 10th, 2021. The Inner Circle Summit is a one-day event where leaders from a variety of industries and backgrounds get together to mastermind and to learn from some of the top leaders in the world. Our keynote speaker this year is Paul Martinelli. Now, for those of you who have listened to the podcast for a little while, you're going to recognize his name because he's actually been on the podcast. He was my very first guest on the podcast, and he's been a mentor of mine now for a number of years. He's a native of Pittsburgh, and he is the co-founder of the John Maxwell team. And he's shared the stage with greats like John Maxwell himself, and Seth Godin, and Zig Ziglar, Nick Vujicic, and Les Brown, just to name a few. And if you want to know anything about building and growing a business, you really have to be in the room on December 10th at the Inner Circle Summit. Now, we also have been able to secure some of his time for a very exclusive VIP evening on Thursday, December the 9th, where you'll be able to be in a very intimate environment, and you'll have an opportunity to ask Paul your business growth questions. We're limiting this particular opportunity and option to a very small group, so be sure to jump on and register quickly before we sell out. The registration page that you need is at davidmcglennon.com/Inner Circle Summit, which is in all lowercase, davidmcglennon.com/Inner Circle Summit. So in this episode, it's a new experience for me because I have not one, but two guests on, and I interview them together. And this is a new experience, obviously, but they are great. And one of the great things about having this podcast is that I get to have some conversations with some really, really interesting and amazing people. And I have to say that this was one of them. Now, how this came about is that I read an article in the Harvard Business Review, and I just really resonated with the co-authors of this article. And so I just reached out, and believe it or not, they had just written a book, and they gave me an advanced copy. I was able to read it and have them on the podcast. And so I am super excited to share this interview with you. Let me first just read a little excerpt from their book because I think this will set up the conversation really well. And I quote, "Imagine what it feels like to work in a place that treats people like human beings, not resources. Imagine what is possible when how you work together is just as important as what work you do. Imagine working in an organization where people and profits are equally valued. This is a place where humanity works, and this is what we want for you and the people you work with. Humanity Works Better was written to help you and your organizations improve workplace productivity. Working together is messy, and most people don't know how to navigate it well." End quote. And that excerpt was from Debbie Cohen and Kate Roeske-Zummer's book called Humanity Works Better: 5 Practices to Lead with Awareness, Choice, and the Courage to Change. So let me give you a little bit of a bio for both Debbie and Kate. Debbie Cohen's beliefs about human potential are grounded in decades of working with humans, big and small. Her career began as a teacher and a leader of early childhood education programs at Stanford University and the USGS. This era shaped her thinking about how humans grow and evolve and the role that environments play. She moved on and applied these ideas, building strategies with companies seeking to attract and retain key talent through work-life initiatives. This work heightened her awareness of systematic roadblocks and the impact that they have on people and productivity. Shifting from consulting to internal work, Debbie began leading work-life for Time Warner, just after the infamous AOL-Time Warner merger. She became known for getting groups who did not typically work well together to a place of shared focus and effort. And this ignited a bigger shift into executive leadership roles in HR at Time Warner, Razorfish, Mozilla, and First Look LLC. The impact of Debbie's work was recognized in a case study released by Harvard Business Publishing, People Operations at Mozilla Corporation, Scaling a Peer-to-Peer Global Community, which received the 2013 Berkeley-Haas Case Award for the most important contribution to management education. Let me just read a little bit about Kate as well. So Kate Roeske-Zummer knows vulnerability-based leadership creates stronger relationships, more authentic connections, and better results. As an account manager at Ogilvy and Mather, Kate recognized the power in distributing responsibility to the people on her team. She experienced firsthand that the whole of a team really is greater than the sum of its parts. Eventually, Kate experienced the fatigue that comes from working in a system where conversations repeat and go nowhere. So she changed what she could, which was where she put her focus. She let go of her advertising career, and in 2003, she became a certified coach back when folks only associated the term coach with sports. Several decades and hundreds of clients later, Kate remains steadfast in her calling to support people on their journey to be the humans they want to be. She knows the power of coaching to help people overcome their internal roadblocks. This is her purpose in life. Kate is now a master coach, even devoting 8 years to training other coaches on the faculty of Coactive Training Institute. She has brought her skills to organizations including Mozilla, Pinterest, Adobe, Davita, CBS Interactive, United Way of America, Intuit, Clever, Charge, and Articulate. She has a master's degree from Cambridge University, England. And I don't want to just belabor the point anymore, but this conversation was amazing. So let's just go ahead and get into it right now. Well, hello, ladies. Thank you so much for joining me. It's great to have you both here in the growth space. I just am really excited to have this conversation. You know, one of the things that was interesting is I was introduced to you both through a local Vistage chair who sends out a weekly email. And he had a link to your article in the Harvard Business Review. I read the article and I thought, I've got to have these two on my podcast because you're singing my song, as they say. So welcome.
Thank you. It's so nice to
choir.
Yeah, that's right. It's so delightful to be here. That's awesome.
I love it. I love it. Well, so needless to say, I did read your article in the Harvard Business Review. And I think the one thing that I wanted to start with today, just the conversation around, is you had this phrase or this quote that says, people are humans, not resources. And I love that. And I think that a lot of times this is a big shift for many leaders who have been used to calling things a human resource. And so I'd just love to just open up with that. Like, what led you to that phrase, and like, how did you get to that part in your journey? And that's directed to either you, Debbie, or you, Kate, either one.
Yeah. Well, I'll go first. You know, when I ended up in the HR space, not by design, but by default, and I was really critical of what was happening in that space. Mm-hmm. And when the opportunity, I don't know if it presented myself or it was more like, you need to do this, came along, I thought I can either sit on the outside and complain, or I could go inside and see how hard is it to really get stuff done. Mm-hmm. And because I didn't come from that discipline, I walked in and gratefully was surrounded by just world-class experts doing great things. But it afforded me the chance to ask a million questions. Why do we do it this way? What would it look like to add value? How do we know we're adding value? What do our people need from us, as opposed to overcomplicating things and somehow making our value that way? And part of the reason I became so enamored with the space was I just felt like people are the heart and soul. They are what fuel a company. And so why do we not treat people like that? And I just became really curious about it. And it wasn't until one of my last interim gigs, and they did a really sweet goodbye for me, where the HR person said, I never knew it could be this way. I didn't know that you could be in this function and allow and honor people as humans, not resources. And it was really a acknowledgement from someone else. And I was like, So we just sort of pulled it in to so much of what we do because it's such a honest reflection. And there's so much in this space, the HR space, that is old ways of thinking that reinforce people as resources, which is where HR came from in the beginning of its origin. But that's not what it is today. It's certainly not what it is after the last 18 months. So I think it's just time to rebrand it, rethink it, and think about our people and our organizations differently, which is really part of the problem set and why we wrote the book.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic, Debbie. Kate, what about you? I'd love to hear your
Well,
take.
where I seem to be telling this story quite a bit, but it's true. We were at a disruptor dinner party, and I spent most of the time wondering why I was sitting there with people who were talking about the time continuum and how people can hold on to time. And I'm going, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
It was a really fun dinner party.
It was a really fun dinner party. Deb was hosting.
Yeah.
And somebody was talking about a just-in-time learning platform. And it was this kind of cool idea, like, you're in one part of the US and you have somebody who's in Spain, and you would get a notification saying, oh, coming up this next week is national holiday, so you could sort of figure out the coverage, for that part of the business. And you could also potentially ask him, what are you doing for this upcoming national holiday? And somebody at the dinner party said, well, that's great, but how is that going to help with productivity? And it was like someone lit a fire underneath me. And I was like, because, just on jumping onto the bandwagon of what Deb is saying, because you need your people to get all of the work done that you need to get done.
It wasn't that calm when she said
I was going to say, wait a minute, in your book, and I'm so glad that you shared this story, because I was going to ask you about the story, because what I remember reading in your book is like, no, because people really want to know that you give a shit about them, right?
That's exactly right.
That's what happened.
That is what happened. I'm trying to be polite and not swear so much, but
it's okay.
It really is what happened. I was like, because, if that person feels like you care about them and are curious about them, then when push comes to shove, and you know what, you've got this impossible deadline and you need all hands on deck, right? When you ask your people, then, will you be with me? Will you help us figure this out? Our whole purpose is, if people feel like you give a shit about them, guess what? They're going to give it their all. They're going to give it their all.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
not rocket science to us, but somehow that's missing out of the whole people or resources, productivity, and it's missing out of all of that.
Well, and one of the things that I think, and this was something I was going to ask you about, because one of the things I think that happens oftentimes is we get programmed at an early age in our business life, so to speak. And many of us I'll speak for myself. I grew up in an era where it was really all about just productivity, and it's the old industrial era mindset. Right. And so, like, how do we shift that mindset of probably a lot of senior leaders or many senior leaders? I think there's a tide that's shifting, and your book and your work is going to help that for sure. But like, how do we shift that mindset to that population of leader who just thinks that we just got to get our people to, produce more and do more and all of that?
It's so funny. We were talking about this in a little bit different way yesterday, that certainly when I entered the workforce, which was, a long, long time ago, really back in the 70s, I entered the workforce late 70s, early 80s. And, I was brought up in an era where there was reciprocity. You showed up, you did a good days of labor, and in turn for that labor, you were paid wages. And that was really about it, right? Yeah. And for folks like Kate's dad, he might have worked his whole life in the same company. My grandpa had a business and he ran that business his whole career. Yeah. But those days are over, right? First, I gave you a wage and people are expecting more. Employers expect more from their people. We sped up that conveyor belt and we asked people to do more faster. And then we sped up that conveyor belt and we took off every other person. And we said, now we need fewer of you to keep producing more. Keep going, people, right? Until people are like, I have nothing left to give. I have nothing left. And they started asking and requiring more. And then we decided, well, gee, this will be good. Let's put all these perks and fluffy stuff around our people so we can keep them at work more and make them think they're having fun while they're doing it. You know, look, I was part of that era and that worked for a while. And then this catalytic event called the pandemic happened. And it was like the finger went into the hamster wheel and it's caused us all to stick our head up and say, you know, I loved on your online introduction, David, it talks about we got to stop doing stuff the old way. It doesn't work anymore. Right. This idea that you're going to have lifelong employment from your people, you are not. Your people aren't going to be with you forever and you're not going to be loyal to them forever. So maybe we need to rethink this and say, maybe we need to do like a term of duty. When you hire in, how long do you want to be here? What do you want to contribute? What do you want to learn? Maybe it's time to move on. Maybe we look at tenure and pay attention to that more than turnover because people are going to leave. Things have changed and it's time to move along the workforce and the way that we think about our relationship with our people.
We're in a lot of conversations with a lot of different people right now. And it's so interesting. Everyone's talking about the great resignation, and we really believe that this is the great reset. That's something that we really believe. Like, it's not just the pandemic. It's not just millennials. It's not just any one thing.
Justice.
It's not. There's a conflation of all of these things. It's way more complex. And I understand we want to dumb it down. We want to simplify it so I can just make it stop. Right. There's a little bit of hand flapping going on right now that people just want to make it stop. And, you know, you'll see this throughout the book, but it's our pause. Get curious with your people. Get curious with the policies that you have in place. Are they working? Are they outdated? What do you people want? Right? It's a new day, folks. And I love that. The old stuff is old, right? So more is being now asked, not just of the employees, but also of the leadership and the people that are managing and running those organizations.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that that's where the rub is. I think our leaders, I mean, all of us don't particularly care for change, but I think, and what I'm remembering, you know, in your book, you're talking about really embracing change. And I love the word embrace because, and you even said this in your work, that words mean things. And when you embrace change, to me, you're leaning in and you're really grabbing a hold of it. And I think that that's really what our leaders must do now, because it's kind of like the turn of this century, not just this century, but the last century. You know, when we moved from, you know, an agrarian society to an industrial society, now we're in a knowledge economy. We're in I think a creative economy, and we have to be able to change the way we're working. And so I love what you said, Kate, about it's not just one thing, it's all of these things kind of coming together.
What's coming up for me with that too, David, is that you mentioned mindset before, and in the book, right, we do a touch, because we wanted to put our focus somewhere else. We do a touch on mindsets, 4 different mindsets to sort of do a self-check. Back to the self-awareness piece, right? Boundaries, resistance, meaningful connections, and outcome creating. And in the research, it shows that most of us, 85% of adults, never evolve beyond a reactive state of being, meaning something happens to us and we react to it. And the opportunity, our belief, the competitive advantage as a human, as a society, and certainly in a business, is to develop yourself to be generative in those moments and spend less time in the swirl of the reactive. And that is a mindset choice. that we write about. But when you are in that moment that Kate was just referring to, of what do I want to create from this moment? Not how do I have to stop the pain of this moment?
Yeah.
It puts you in a very different place to lead both your life and your organizations.
Yeah. I love that, and I think you're spot on. Well, and you used a phrase there that I'm curious about. So you talked about competitive advantage, and I often said that our cultures as an organization, our company cultures can be our competitive advantage. And I think there's this myth of culture that it's soft and squishy and it doesn't translate into results. And so I guess for those leaders who kind of still are thinking that way, how do we change the way we look at culture and turn it into our competitive advantage?
Well, this is one of the things that we talk about in the book. Here's a very simple way of thinking about it. If your people are not getting along with each other, how much work are you getting done? How much work are you getting done that you need to get done? How is that going? Are people happy? Are they looking for other jobs? Right? There is a domino effect when your people are not getting along. It's directly related to this idea of collaboration. And right now, if people are collaborating better, they're probably feeling more fulfilled, which means you're probably going to keep them because they're happier doing the work that they want to be doing, right?
Yeah.
And I love it. I love your question because it is very much one of those things that we think that talking about, that's partly why we gave the book the title that we did, which is Humanity Works Better. It's not just about let's all link arms and sing kumbaya together. Right. We are making the case that if your people get along, you will get better results.
Right. We're actually making and to that point, right, the pain point in organizations is we have tried to process re-engineer productivity to death. There's nothing more to squeeze out of your people. And when rubber meets the road, work gets done at the intersection of humanity. People have to talk to each other, resolve conflict, navigate difference, figure out how to solve hard, hairy, big problems, be kind to each other, say hello, get into a relationship. Humanity is about the interdependency of one another. And I promise there is no business out there that is not successful because of its interdependency of people in its organization, those people in their relationship with your customers, your vendors, your suppliers. There is an interdependency. And when we can negotiate how to be with each other, not the doing of the work, but how we're being with other when we do the work, that is the biggest shift. That costs no money. Right. You can do that just by showing up differently, and we're a big believer when you start to change the people around you. And back to culture. Culture is the collective behavior of its people. That's it.
Yeah.
If there's something about your culture that's not right, begin to shift the behavior and your culture will begin to shift.
Couldn't agree more. And I think that so many companies, when they think about culture, they think about the atmosphere and the environment. That's important, but mission, vision, values, all of that's important. But at the end of the day, we have to look at what is going to drive our success, what behaviors are going to drive our success. And when we do that, when we look at the behavioral level, that really helps us to be able to perform what we need to perform to live out our values and to accomplish our mission. And I love what you said, that our business lives at the intersection of humanity. I love that phrase, that intersect, because it really is the hard part of business is the human aspect. And I know that in your book, you've created 5 practices that you talk about that really help any organization to be able to live this out. And so I'd love for you just to maybe unpack that just a little bit. Don't give everything away because we want people to go out and buy your book, but just like a little bit. Because I know that one thing, at the first part of the model, it's creating safety. And I know that I've talked with a lot of senior leaders who say, I know that we've got to create this psychological safety and we've got to create that, but how do we do that? So Like, how do you guys start that?
So what we've done is we have 4 mindsets that Deb was talking about just a minute ago, which is kind of, even before you get into these practices, it's a good place to start and look at there and look at what your mindset is. And then we have these 5 practices, and then embedded in each one of those are 5 skills. So, and those 5 skills can be used with any of those practices, but we've kind of attached a skill to your point. Like, how do I do this?
Right.
So in creating safety, and we say, it's up to you. You are at the middle of the model, right? Yep. Stop looking elsewhere. If only he or she above or below or alongside me would be different, then I would be happier. Nope, we don't buy that. Yep. we buy that if you do something differently, and Deb just said this a second ago, if you behave differently, you will create a different environment. You will change the people around you.
Yeah. So in creating a leader, when you shift, it creates a ripple effect.
Yeah.
A huge ripple effect.
And so in creating safety, we talk about 3 different levels of listening, right? So how do you do that? Really listen to what they're saying. We outline the 3 different levels. You can read all about that. Yeah. But there is something about when you really listen to what is going on, to the people around you, to the atmosphere around you. And if you don't like what's going on, that's when you can step in and say, gosh, something seems a little off here right now. Are we talking about the right thing? And we see how that sort of, the ripple effect that is going to have on that room. Suddenly people are going to be like, wow, now we're talking about the thing that we really should be talking about.
Yeah.
Which in terms of a productivity outcome yields trust. So part of what we did in the book was say, productivity had tons of research about the outcomes, and we tend to use platitudes like trust.
Right.
Leaders, you need to build trust in your organization. And they're like,
you're right.
How do we do it? Right?
Right.
And so part of what we did when we got ready to write the book is like dialed it back a little bit and said, how could we help people get their heads around what could create trust and safety? Physical safety, psychological safety will manifest trust. And as Kate was saying, listening is a conduit. Being able to say, wait a minute, I think we just stepped over something that was really important. David, was there something that you wanted to add into that room? I didn't make anybody wrong, but it created a space that lets people trust that their voice matters and that they can put it into the room in a way that if you agree or have a contrarian point of view, it's safe to have that put out there and heard, and the room will hold space for you to say what you need to say.
Yeah. Yeah. I think go ahead, Kate, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say the next practice is working together, and we're really sort of helping people to not make it about you. Right. So oftentimes, as leaders or managers, like, we get it. You're ambitious. You want to get to the next level. But one of the things that happens when you're a manager, an emerging leader, whatever, is that you need to stop making it about you, and you need to get curious, like, what's going on over there? Put your own needs down.
Yeah.
And we say this is a real perspective shift. Stop making it feel like your needs. Get curious about others, what's happening for them. And because it's not about you, it's about them when you get into that new management place of leading other people.
I think that's a great place, David, of like old mindset of how we're supposed to manage and lead, right? Is by taking charge at the front. And we're really taking an alternative perspective that the productivity outcome here is collaboration. If you want collaboration, you have to show up differently.
Yeah. And I think that's such an important point. I think that we have to what you just said, we have to show up differently. And I think for a lot of leaders, that's challenging. And this whole pandemic has shifted things like that. Sometimes change happens gradually. Sometimes it happens overnight. In this particular case, I think it happened overnight. And a lot of people are going, whoa, wait a second here. How do I navigate this? So I think, you guys couldn't have, timed your book more perfectly, because it's really perfect timing for it.
Yeah.
I
We
love
hope
it.
so.
Yeah, absolutely. I
hope
definitely
so,
think.
you know.
Humanity will be around for a while, so we're going
Yeah,
to.
that's
Yes, right. Uh,
Yeah.
well, so talk more. So that was the first two practices.
First two, yeah. And
yeah?
the next one is claiming value, which is, I think, Deb, we're talking about this more and more with people. And I think it's related to the great resignation and everything that's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
I think people go, I'm not happy here, so I'm going to leave and I'm going to go over there. Right.
Yeah.
And until you do some of that internal work of claiming value, it is about aligning your own behaviors and actions. So what you do and how you do it has continuity so that, you are, gosh, this is really important to me. Let me find ways of bringing that out into the world. And it's not related to necessarily your functional title or work, but it is really the big internal work. You talk about that in terms of that self-awareness work of finding out what is important to you, and then trying to find some sort of alignment between that and what you do every single day.
This is where so many of you have been, told, be authentic, and you're like, what does that mean to be
Does it mean?
authentic?
Right.
I don't know. What does that mean, right?
Right.
And what we're helping you do in this particular chapter is really pause. One of our favorites, probably the next book that we're going to write. Pause and say, like, who do I really want to be? Not who do I think I'm supposed to be?
Yeah.
Not what's the armor I'm supposed to put on when I'm doing leadership, but who am I? And how do I want to reflect that to the world?
Yeah.
Through continuity of my words and my actions and my behaviors. And that will yield continuity. That's what makes compelling leaders, is that continuity of your character, and that you, back to being safe, are reliable, dependable. They know what to expect of you in good times and not great times. You can mess up and the world won't come clamoring around your ankles because you've created a narrative for yourself, a brand for yourself that is honest and true and real.
That's so I have to just pause for a second and speak to the emerging leaders who are listening, because I know part of my emerging leader group has probably heard me talk about this over and over and over again. But this is exactly why what both Debbie and Kate are talking about is why we have you go through clarifying your values, and not only clarifying your values, but creating your own leadership mission statement. Because when you do that, then you can live in alignment with what, like Kate was talking about, live in alignment and be authentic. So I love that you both said that, because I had to pick up on that and just share that. So if you're a part of the Emerging Leader Inner Circle, rewind, go back and listen to the last couple of minutes, because that's why, and that's important. So thank you.
Because totally. Because we've written this newsletter. We do a newsletter too, like all the other people.
Yeah.
But anyway, and because we and one of them is your baggage has wheels. If you're, do you know why you're leaving the organization? What are you going to? What are you not getting? Could you get it where you are? Because otherwise, you're just dragging it along with you. Right. So this is important work to be done, and then the next practice is owning your impact. And one of our favorite topics is leaders. People are watching you, because they are.
Yeah. Right. All the time. Yeah.
It's
kind of like being a parent, right?
Yeah, that's right. And they're calibrating their behavior based on how you are showing up. And we talk about sometimes you have an intended impact and sometimes you have an unintended impact. Right.
Yeah.
And it's important for you to start to not just be in your own head about how you are showing up, how you think you should be showing up. It's also important to be noticing outside with the people around you. What is that impact? Is that the impact that you want to have? And so we do a whole, piece on, are you compelling and what makes you compelling? And this is where we want to bust some of those old beliefs that to be a leader, I need to look a certain way. Talk about a mask on your face, that it has to look a particular way, when we really very wholeheartedly believe that, gosh, the more individual you are, quirky, maybe nerdy, maybe, maybe
Wacky.
quiet.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Wacky, right?
Yeah.
Maybe, warm, right? All of whatever it makes you compelling, be that. Just be that.
And imagine
So
what that
good.
does back to some of the movements inside organizations to be more inclusive of different people and styles. And when show up as your full expression of self, taking responsibility for an impact that you might create that is unintended.
Mhm.
So it's not full permission to just show up and
Yeah.
not take responsibility, I guess.
Right.
It gives permission to other people too, because
Yeah.
they're watching you. And when you lead the way,
Mhm.
other people will follow. It feels
Yeah.
safer.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. So true. So I know that leads then to the last practice that you guys talk about, daring to know. So talk a little bit about that.
Oh, no, but let me just help you correct that. It is
Okay.
daring not to know.
Daring not to know. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
It's daring not to know, which is this is like the one I could talk about all day long. And it is busting that old belief that as leaders, we need to know. And if we don't know, we're just going to make it up. And
Yeah.
this is where this one is I'm so passionate about, because it is sort of turning leadership on its head in a way.
Yeah.
Our very strong belief is, how do we give people permission to admit that they don't know everything, because you cannot know everything.
Exactly.
And so we talk about
What
this
a
as
relief that must be.
Right.
Yes,
Exactly.
Say
Oh, for sure.
that.
Yeah.
No.
and that this is a
Amazing.
practice of surrender. And what's it like to admit that you don't know? And when you have the courage to say that, it invites other people into the conversation, into
Right.
participating to solve some of these super complex problems that we're having. But more importantly, to me, it's about you being authentic and
Mhm.
trusting the people that are on your team to help you all solve the problems that you need to be solving.
Begins
Yeah.
to knit things together, right? At the end, productivity outcome here is engagement, right? When you
Yes.
create space for others to step with you in
Mhm.
solving a problem, offering solutions, feeling seen, being trusted to put their voice in the room, imagine it sort of brings the model a bit full circle, although you can step into the model wherever your place of need is. Um,
Yeah.
it's a powerful one. It is probably with the C-suite level one of the places we're having the most conversations, because people are like, okay, well, like, but how do I do that? I can't just like step
Right.
out onto an all hands meeting and be like, I'm clueless, folks. I don't know what we're going to. I don't
Yeah.
know where we're headed, how to get there, right?
Yeah.
And so here the probably trick, the tip to getting in the groove with this particular practice is curiosity.
Mm.
Right? It's like, hey, David, I'm wondering what
Yeah.
you're thinking. I've been chewing on this idea of how to make a better box. Have you ever thought about that?
Mhm.
What are your ideas? And you
Yeah.
invite people into a conversation with you, which is another way of not knowing,
Right.
I've been trying to solve this problem of how to create a new zipper, feels
Yeah.
like it's been done before, but man, if we could make a zipper that would zip backwards, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What ideas do you have about that? We're going to get fuller participation. People are going to be more engaged in the outcome. They're going
Mhm.
to want to help you bring something to life if they feel like, man, I was a part of that, as opposed
Yeah.
to just passive recipients to your brilliance.
Because our
Yeah.
belief is that people want to contribute. They're doing the work that they're
Yes.
doing at your organization because they want to help as well.
Right.
Well, it's one
Right.
of the big mindsets right now that, man, we're having lots of conversations with companies about meaningful connections. And one
Mm.
of the best ways to create meaningful connections is to step toward people and
Right.
engage.
Right. Yeah. And that I think has been made harder in some ways during the pandemic. Yet at the same time, I know a lot of leaders who are being very intentional with their stepping into that and getting closer and making that connection. And I think those are the ones who have been successfully navigating this whole time as well. And so I love that you said that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're talking to a business who's like hearing this and they say, okay, I get it. I want to make sure that I make the shift, and I want to make sure that I'm looking at my people as humans and not resources. What's the first place to start, other than the fact that they need to go buy your book, which I want to make sure that we'll talk about that here in a second, how they go do that. But like, what's their first step?
Well, I'm sort of reminded in this moment of a conversation I had with Henry Kimsey House, who's one of the founders of coaching the industry and CTI in particular, the Coaches Training Institute. And, I said to him, gosh, do you think you can change an organization? He said, no, I don't think you can. I was like, really? He's like, no, but I can change you, and I can change you, and I can change you. And if I change all of you individually, collectively, you're going to have a shift in the organization.
Yeah.
And so I think that there are some, of course we have training programs, coaching, but there's a part of us that really believes that this has to come from individuals. And if you start with the leadership of your organization, you are going to see a ripple effect for sure.
One of the things, tying on to Henry's work internally to companies when I was doing that work from the inside, one of the things that I would often look at is, where's the pain the greatest? And I get right now there's a lot of pain in a lot of places and everybody's trying to figure stuff out. But when I went into organizations, and still we go in and work and advise with companies, we look at where's their pain, right? A lot of times we come into companies that are on the cusp of rapid growth, and they're either trying to proactively position for growth, or they are in the deep pain points of that rapidly scaling growth. And there's a lot of mess and confusion that they're wanting some humanity brought to. And so we're just a big fan of where the pain is the greatest is where receptivity to relief will come. And so if you look at where the pain is the greatest in your organization, that might be in you, it might be in your leadership team, it might be in your management crew, or, my heart just bleeds for managers right now because their job of what they thought managers were has now changed. And now it's changed again with them taking on all kinds of weight for people's health and well-being. So wherever the pain is the greatest, that might be a place to step in and be like, what could we do? Where could we use some of these practices or skills to begin to shift ourselves and our organizations and help people feel seen and heard and valued in a way that is real and true and honest.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. I think that is so insightful, and I appreciate that. And one of the things that it reminds me of, and when Kate, when you were sharing, I was part of a leadership group that went down to South America and with John Maxwell, and part of our saying was that transformation begins in me. And it's all, and when we look at me and we look at where can I change, where can I transform, then I can impact others. It's almost like putting your own oxygen mask on first. And I think that a lot of leaders need to hear that right now, because they need to make sure that they're taking care of themselves, yes, and also being really aware of how they're showing up and where they need to shift and change, and being totally vulnerable about that as well. And so I think that the way you focused this book is phenomenal. And so I know we could actually go on for hours, because I've got so much curiosity about your book, your model, and just the whole topic. But let's send our listeners to where they can find your book. Where do they get it? Where do they get a hold of you? Where do they connect with you guys?
So you can check us out on our website, which is HumanityWorks.com, all one word, no dots or dashes. And there are tons of resources on there. This podcast will be on there, other podcasts that we've been, sort of a part of, articles and newsletters and all of that good stuff. So definitely come and check us out. We're also on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook and all of that.
We're very responsive to messages on LinkedIn, and that's probably the easiest and probably our highest traffic site. And also the website has a contact site for us. We're refreshing just because we've redone our programs to align with the model. So we offer programs for managers, our Resilient Manager program, our Influential Leader program, and our Executive Pause program. So manager, emerging leaders, C-suite. We will have early next year an online program so people can take a deeper dive into some of the practices of the group through a self-paced and then blended learning approach. So you can have a book group or a facilitator on your HR team or a team lead or somebody in your group that just is passionate about it.
The book is available everywhere: Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, Walmart, all that good stuff. So if you feel inclined, check us out on Amazon and write a review. That would be awesome.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So I just want to encourage our listeners. So go out and get this book. It really is amazing. I'm about halfway through it right now, and the model is really good. The way you've told stories, I love that, and I'm super grateful you talked about that disruption party, because my curiosity wants me to like go down this rabbit hole of like, how did you think of a disruption party? And actually, let's just go there for a second before we wrap up, because how did you think of that disruption party? Because I think that's a cool idea. And tell me more.
So I'm the contrarian. So, if you say, oh, think of this, I'll be like, why don't we think of that? And I was chatting with a good friend of ours, Dino Anderson, and he and I had been flirting with this idea for years. And finally, Dino's like, let's make it happen. And so Dino is like the consummate connector. And I'm like, ooh, let's throw a party.
Cool.
So I threw the party. Dino invited the people. And the idea of a disruptor dinner is a little bit like a perspective wheel in coaching. There is a singular
I just loved
topic
that conversation because there were so
about
many good
topic.
points that,
and you invite people together
that were brought up in the conversation. And the first and foremost,
topic.
I think,
so
is just that people are humans. They're not resources.
Humans.
And so I really think that,
potential.
and no offense to our people and our folks in human resources,
robotics.
but we really need
there
to find
a
better term for
Kate and I were there.
the human component and the people
like a
who
practitioner
take care of our people. And the
the
other thing that came out of this for me, and it was really in the book title, Humanity Works Better. The reason why I think this is a great title is that we are in a new era right now. And I can't remember, I think it might have been Debbie that said, people are the heart and soul of an organization, and that HR isn't what it used to be. Human resources is not what it used to be.
Ignite some fires underneath some people like us.
The other point that I think is really important, and if you're a leader, you got to hear this. And I loved the quote, and this is a quote from the book, that if people feel like you give a shit about them, they're going to give it their all. Forgive the little bit of the salty language, but it's really true.
It's amazing.
If people know that you care, and not this false caring stuff, but really truly care,
looking at things from different perspectives
you're
about a
get
singular topic,
their all.
not making
they're going to
someone
give it their all.
right
They're going to
or
buy
wrong,
into
but
the
to be
mission.
able
They're
just
going to buy
explore
into
it,
the vision,
expand our
and they're going
minds
to
and
go
expand our
all in.
viewpoint.
And
I
if
love
this
that. I think
isn't
that's
your
great.
normal
may have to
way
borrow
of
that and create
operating,
something like that
if this is
too.
not
I think it's
the
cool.
way you were brought up, or the way that you grew up in business, it's going to take a
Plagiarism
shift
is
in our
the biggest form
mindset.
of flattery or something.
And I'm just telling you right now, we as leaders have to shift our mindset to adapt to the era that we're in.
I really
and
appreciate the
I think it was
conversation
Debbie
really your perspective
that
and your
even
work.
said too,
And I will say to our listeners,
maybe we
they
have
are
to
both
start
very
thinking about
responsive.
having a
I
term
reached out
of
to them.
duty,
I read the Harvard
almost
Business
like
Review
almost
article
like a
and
contract.
just
I
connected
think
with
of
them
like
on
a
LinkedIn. I
military
said,
contract.
this is
You go
such
in and
great
you
work.
sign up for
I'd
4
love to have you
years.
on the podcast, and boom, within about
and maybe you ask
a
the
day or
people
two,
as you
we had
onboard
this set
them,
up. So I'm
how
so
long do you want to
grateful,
be
and I'm
here?
really
What's
glad
your
that you
term
were
of
able to share
duty?
this
And
with,
really, I
with our
really like
community.
the frame that
Thank you so
this
much for
is
your
the
support.
Great
It really does mean
Reset.
a lot.
And it's
we
a
keep saying this
time
to all these
in
early
a working environment
supporters
that
of
has
ours,
changed.
like,
Everything has
we will
changed.
return in
And so we
kind.
have to
so
embrace
appreciate
that
this kind of
change. We have
support in
to
terms of where we
lean
are, 'cause we
into it
want
and
more
just
humanity
give it
in
an
the workplace.
embrace. But more than that, get curious with your people.
I love it. I love it.
And ask
well,
if it's working.
Thank you both. I resonate so much with your message.
I know
and
that
work,
the greatest leaders that I've ever been around are incredibly curious.
Certainly will do it.
And when we do that, when we get curious about our people and we embrace change, we're going to turn our culture into our competitive advantage. Because when our people are getting along and they're collaborating better, they'll be more productive and they'll get better results. So don't think that our culture and all of this stuff is fluffy, because it is going to create more productivity and better results. Work gets done at the intersection of humanity was a quote that Debbie gave. And I love that our work does get done at the intersection of humanity. And when we look at our teams as humans and making sure that we care and they know that we care, then we're going to get better results and we're going to be more productive. And if there's something wrong with your culture, you have to shift behaviors. You have to look at behaviors. And I know that can be uncomfortable, but we've got to do it. And I really love the practical advice about generous listening and creating trust within the people of the organization. And really what that says is that if you want collaboration, you have to show up differently. And you have to do the internal work on your own and claiming your own value and defining your values. I just want to encourage you that if you haven't done this already, I know that our emerging leaders have done this, but create your leadership mission statement that aligns to your values. And that will help be your North Star. And this is going to help you to show up as your authentic self. And when others are watching, you'll be aligned and you'll be congruent. And the other key point that I thought was really impactful that Kate shared is daring not to know and giving people permission to not know something, and that admitting that you don't know something is really going to lead to trust, and it's going to allow for, and that really truly is what Patrick Lencioni calls vulnerability-based trust. So admit that you don't know something and allow your people to not know as well. That's a key behavior and a key component in this book that Kate and Debbie have written. And just in that, keep ramping up your curiosity. And even if you think you know something, ramp up your curiosity and ask good questions. So keep stepping towards your people, keep making connections with your people, and start there. So that's the place to start. Wherever your pain is greatest in your organization, that's going to be where the receptivity is going to be the best. Start there. And transformation is going to begin with you as the leader. So I want to just recommend that you go out and get this book and go to HumanityWorks.com, or if you go get it on Amazon, you can go to Amazon and get it there, and make sure you give them a review. So thank you so much for listening in today. This has been a great conversation and a great interview with some amazing authors. And so I hope that you will tune in again. Go hit the subscribe button, rate the podcast, give us a review, share a little bit of what your key takeaway was from this particular episode. I'd love to hear it. And again, don't forget to get out and register for the Inner Circle Summit. And I hope to meet you there. Until next time, remain in the growth space and be well.